I shouted across the long corridor, and they all looked in my direction in shock, and stopped immediately. Because they knew there would be severe consequences for their actions. They knew I would follow up with severe sanctions, emails and phone calls. The chaos was mental, the laughter was loud, their voices the same loud and manic, the play fighting and silliness, all scattered like dust across the maths department corridor. It was change of lesson. No SLT member on standby. The corridor had erupted moments earlier, like it always does. Now it was quiet, like it never happened. Sanity restored on the corridor as they walked away quietly to their next lesson. In that chaotic moment I confiscated 6 mobile phones for breach of school policy. Some students had filmed the chaos and disruption they'd caused themselves. But I wasn't surprised. Because I have seen it all before. No SLT on standby. Leadership would always promise in every staff briefing to support the transition between. They never do. Welcome to the story of Kujo Kwasi. When I speak, they listened. Whenever I walk into the Year 10 assembly hall, even at its noisiest, the room hushed. Not out of fear. Out of something deeper, my expectations respect. A silent understanding of my expectations as form tutor, and the respect that had been built over time. Kujo had built strong relationships with students across the whole school. They trusted him. And the staff knew it too. He was one of the few who could command a room with his presence alone. Even before he speaks. But in staff meetings? In promotion rounds? In leadership circles? That same presence went unseen, invisible. Unnoticed, and tactically ignored, except when he is needed. And it was always October again. The corridors would suddenly fill with posters of Malcolm X, Maya, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Nelson Mandela. That's when the school would remember that I existed. Every October they would ask me, "Could you do an assembly on Black History Month? Could you help the Year 9s put together a presentation on slavery? Would you mind leading a workshop on Black excellence?" And I would smile, tight-lipped, tired, knowing this was the only time of year I would be visible. The only time my identity felt useful. The only time they'd remember that I was more than just a name on the staff list. They called it inclusion. I called it performance. What they didn't see, or chose not to, was the rest of the year. The meetings I wasn't invited to. The leadership opportunities one was never offered. The extra duties I was silently expected to pick up, especially when it came to managing, challenging behavior. Always the same students. Always the ones who looked like me. "Sir, you get them. You understand them," they'd say, handing me another angry black boy with a referral form and no plan. And I did understand. That was the problem. I understood the weight those boys carried. I understood what it meant to be misunderstood. I understood that sometimes, acting out was the only way to be seen. But understanding didn't earn me promotions. Or put food on my table for myself and my family. It didn't get me interviews. It didn't move me up leadership ladder. Same position, year in, and year out. Year after year, I mentored younger teachers, bright, ambitious, sometimes less experienced. I watched them rise, head of department. Lead practitioner. Assistant head. Deputy head. I smiled at their success, and swallowed my own frustration. And me? I stayed in the same role. This was my experience. And I know I'm not alone. I was only good for one thing, and one thing only, behavior management. I got the email that morning. Then a call from the headteacher's personal assistant. A lovely and lively lady, always nice and polite. She would always make me feel welcome whenever I'm in her office. The phone was a reminder about my meeting with the headteacher that afternoon. They'd arranged cover for my last lesson. The lesson I was meant to be teaching. I already knew what it was about. As I sat outside his office, waiting, I stared at the framed posters on the corridor wall, equal opportunities for all. Every child matters. All staff valued equally. I smiled. Tight. Tired. I'd read them 100 times before. He walked in briskly, holding a folder, and flashed the same smile he always wore when he needed something. "How are you doing?" he asked. We both knew it was a warm-up. The meeting was brief. Straight to the point. He wanted to know what I had planned for this year's Black History Month. He asked about the whole school assembly. The display boards. The daily announcements over the tannoy. Any activities for tutor groups. Could we get parents involved this year? I nodded, made notes, answered where I could. The more he spoke, the more I felt the familiar pattern unfold, that subtle pressure to perform the role that had been carved out for me. The black expert. The cultural curator. The school's annual dose of diversity. Not a leader. Not a strategist. Not a candidate. Just the person they turned to in October. I remembered the leadership post I had applied for earlier that term. I hadn't even been shortlisted for interview. No feedback. No conversation. A week later, they announced the new appointee, a younger white colleague. Fresh out of her 3rd year. Someone I had mentored and coached just 2 years ago. I clapped for her in the staff room that day. But something in me stayed seated, in pain and silence. I would always remember the ones I raised, the ones I coached, and mentored. The ones I poured into. I was the teacher they called on when others couldn't cope. If behavior was spiraling, if classrooms were losing control, if policies weren't landing, I was asked to lead the strategy sessions on inset days, in twilight sessions, and CPD evenings. Whenever a teacher struggled with behavior, the advice was always the same: go see Mr. Kwasi. Or worse, go observe one of his lessons. It wasn't said with malice. It was said with admiration, and perhaps a little relief. They trusted me. I had presence. I had consistency. And I get results. But that trust never translated into progression. Every September, I was asked to lead the new ECTs through their induction: how to manage behavior, how to build rapport, how to give feedback that didn't crush confidence. I delivered those sessions year after year. I watched each cohort grow, some into brilliant practitioners, some into future leaders. One year, I was asked to co-lead a twilight session with a member of the senior leadership team. I created the PowerPoint. Curated the reading list. Designed the breakout activities. Printed and packaged the resources. We arranged to meet twice before the session to run through it. He didn't show up either time. We finally spoke the day before, a rushed, 10-minute conversation in the staff room corridor. He nodded through my explanations, said, "Looks great," and left. At the actual session, he stood confidently at the front of the room, introducing the materials as if they were his own. He presented my slides. Facilitated the discussions I had designed. And when it ended, the head teacher stood up to thank him warmly. That was a fantastic session. Really insightful. We need more of that from our SLT. I stood at the side. Smiling politely, holding the folder I'd brought in, just in case anyone needed copies. They barely mentioned my name.